This is a white pill moment for everybody. This is hope and optimism. Target makes emergency calls after backlash to, quote, tuck-friendly bathing suits and other Pride products. The company is terrified of a Bud Light situation, a Target insider told Fox News. The company's LGBTQ-themed items were released this month and include tuck-friendly bathing suits, chest binders, and packing underwear, along with gender-fluid mugs and other things. And I'm pretty sure this was like for children, is what the big issue was. Consumers called for a boycott of Target over the products, taking issue with the swimwear, as well as Pride-themed children's clothing, including onesies, t-shirts, socks, and swim skirts, with a tag reading thoughtfully fit on multiple body types and gender expressions. Target also sells a collection of children's books focused on LGBTQ issues. Target is evil. If a company targets kids, that company shouldn't exist. Bud Light them, tweeted conservative media personality Liz Wheeler. Matt Walsh, of course, was saying this is worse than anything Bud Light has done. Of
course. And
so the reporting apparently is that we have this from the Post Millennial. Target to move Pride merch to the back of stores to avoid Bud Light situation. Quote, we were given 36 hours told to take all of our Pride stuff, the entire section, and move it into a section that's a third of the size. That's amazing. Bud Light is seeing another major drop in sales. They're nearly 30% down year over year.
You love to see it.
It's getting worse and worse for them. Conservatives simply said, we have no brand loyalty to Bud Light. This is the scariest thing in the world for the biggest brands. There's no brand loyalty to Target. Nobody's walking around wearing Target shirts being like, yeah, go Target. Bud Light at least had some brand recognition with sports, and that didn't do anything for them. So when it comes to your choice between Target and Walmart, if people are going to be like, Target's bad, we won't go there, it's not a big deal to shop somewhere else.
I really hope that conservatives stick to this, because a few years ago, we saw a similar attempt to boycott Target when they were saying we're going to allow men to use the women's room and abdicate our responsibility to protect female patrons in our stores. And conservatives said, I'm never shopping at Target again. And then many of them started shopping at Target again. So I hope that this is truly a bridge too far and that people are going to stick to it this time. I would also say that if this isn't stuck to, it's going to set a very bad precedent, right? Because people are seeing this as the sort of sequel to the Bud Light boycott. And if it falls apart here, that's going to say a lot about the power of conservatives as protesters or as boycotters of products.
Honestly, I don't think you really need to identify as conservative to have issues with child sex changes.
Agreed.
Like, I'm not that conservative really in life, but little kids that are getting, their parents are like cutting their body parts off and stuff. Like that, just as a human, I kind of wonder what in the hell's going on. Tim's cracking a beer.
What was that, Ian? I couldn't hear what you were saying as I was pulling out this wonderful Stud Light lager. If anybody would like a can.
Stud Light.
Give me a taste. Stud Light. Feel free to grab a can. This is no joke. I don't know if you can see it. Stud Light, and there's a cowboy on it with a horse. And it's from Harvest Gap Brewery in Hillsboro, Virginia.
That's hilarious.
So we were just driving past this brewery and we walked in.
Here you are.
And I noticed they had something called Stud Light.
That's hilarious.
Oh, that's really good. I'm not a big beer drinker, but I had no choice but to buy a beer called Stud Light with a manly cowboy on it, because I have to wonder. I'm not saying the brewery did anything to. What, you want to just grab one?
Here you go.
Plus we got a bunch down there. Serge,
whatever you don't take it.
I'm not saying that. I don't know if this brewery made this intentionally because of what was happening.
It's hilarious.
But to see that they've got Stud Light and there's a cowboy on it, I was like, I kind of feel like, they're having fun.
Super funny.
And it's a light lager, and it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just thought it'd be funny if we just cracked some.
If you look at Bud Light's market, though, I mean, what Ian was talking about, just to be offended by targeting kids for this is a whole different cross section than just conservatives. But if you look at who shops at Target, it's not as much like who buys your stuff at Target. I mean, a little bit of everybody, but who drinks Bud Light? I mean,
yeah,
the people that used to drink Bud Light aren't going to go along with this whole trans movement kind of Dylan Mulvaney kind of thing. And they're also not going to buy it was an April Fool's joke. And so Bud Light made a bad situation worse by not owning it. And now, okay, their ESG score took a tally. Instead of owning that, they're still trying to but we can do everything. And it's like, no, man, this is a T intersection. You're going to have to pick. You can either keep the people that used to drink Bud Light, or you can go woke.
I think the thing with Bud Light and Target is that Target it is smart of them to panic in the way they're panicking.
Yeah.
And they should probably just remove these products because the left will try and lie. But look, I don't care what an adult wants to do. Seamus and I will have a disagreement on this. Like, I don't care about someone who's LGBTQ or whatever, privacy of your own home. These are all the old traditional arguments from liberals. You live your life, you be happy, we mind our own business. Keep the kids out of it. They're now trying to argue that the LGBTQ stuff is not inherently sexual.
Yep.
It's quite literally what it is. LGBT quite literally are references to sexual identities and sexualities. There's no reason for you to bring that to children. This is what Target is doing. They should not be doing that. Here's what I think. Bud Light loses about 25% of its market with this whole stunt, and they're not going to get it back. They may still see growth because new people enter the market and population is, well, if the population expands. If it doesn't, then they're going to lose more drinkers. But I don't think it'll go to zero, right? They've seen about a 30% drop off so far. It's like 28% or something like that. These are the people who pay attention, who don't want to drink Bud Light, don't want to be seen drinking Bud Light. There's a lot of people who don't care. They don't watch the news. They're not on Twitter. They're not on the internet. They just went to the liquor store to get some beer, and they said Bud Light's half off, and they went, "Wow, me and my buddies want to get drunk. We'll take it half off." Some people might even know and just be like, "Don't know, don't care, cheap beer." With Target, I think you'll see something similar. A lot of people who know will just say, "I will not shop there anymore." That's why Target is freaking out, not because they're going to go out of business, but because they could lose 30% of their customers in a month. Mm-hmm. And that's bad news.
I agree with basically everything you're saying. There's just one thing I'd probably phrase differently, and I think you'd actually agree with me on this when you said there's no reason for them to be introducing this sexual stuff to children. We know there's a reason, and we know what the reason is. It's because they want to groom these kids.
Yeah. Target?
I think the people at Target who are trying to normalize this, there's an entire effort within our systems to push sexually perverse behaviors onto children.
They're owned by Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. These companies keep popping up. Any of these publicly traded things. I mean, those three corporations, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, own like 24% of Target. They
are pushing an agenda. I completely agree with you, Seamus, and it is bad. Look, my kids are at a point where I never thought, gee, we need to cover boys are different than girls and all that stuff. It's pretty intuitive, but we're at an age where they're very overtly introducing this to kids. And people say, well, gender's a spectrum and it's totally different than sex. No, you're given cross-sex hormones. You're using cross-sex pronouns. And the surgeries that you want to do, including to minors, are on the sexually distinctive physical attributes of your anatomy. Mm-hmm. You cannot change. You're either an XY person, male, or an XX person. You can't change your bone structure, everything else. You can't change those attributes.
With rare exception.
It's out there. There are some. There's some variants, but that's not what we're having this debate about.
Yeah.
Right.
Those sections at Target, and the whole transgenderism movement that's going on in the country, spreading all over the place, isn't the traditional cross. Issue with hormones that come. There are DNA chromosome issues that you're talking about. So look, XY people, they're different than XX people. Everyone has gotten that for all of time until very recently.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You mentioned this point about us having to debate the differences between boys and girls and you not thinking you'd be at this point. I feel similarly. I first became interested in politics when I was about 8 years old because I learned what abortion was, and it was so shocking to me that anyone could consider that a morally acceptable thing or that it would be legal. And so I've been interested in these things from a very early age, and I had some hope as a kid that by the time I was an adult, if I ever had any kind of political career or a career in commentary, we would have moved on to other issues and society might have progressed. Of course, my optimism was misplaced. Here we are 20 years later and we're debating the differences between boys and girls, literally.
Well,
we've completely regressed.
I don't think we're debating them. I think there is a cult that will lie, cheat, and steal. So they'll come to you and pretend like there's a debate to trick you into debating them because they know that you'll operate in good faith to debate those ideas.
Interesting.
Meanwhile, look,
I know. I
It's
think
like-
there's
it's like-
truth in that.
It's the video of Jack Posobiec getting punched by the leftist. And then when the cops pull up, because the cops watch it happen, the leftists, one of them goes, I didn't see anything happen. They're just lying about everything. They know the difference between boys and girls. They're just trying to destroy the system.
It seems like when you disrupt the system, it's the person that's the most powerful that suffers the most. So like if you cut everybody's value by 5%, it's the one with the most value that's going to lose the most, because 5% of the most is more than 5% of less than that. So like COVID shut down the entire world. The United States probably suffered the most because it was doing the best. And now we've got the disruption of the youth, of the psychology of the youth. The United States has the most to lose because it's the leader of the planet. And I don't think it's an accident, man. It's a global internet.
When you cut off the tall grass, the short grass stays where it is.
I'm gonna slightly push back against both things. I hear what you're saying, and I think I agree overall. But when it comes to who can suffer the most, so for example, you're right that someone who's extremely wealthy and loses 5% of their wealth has lost more material wealth, technically speaking. But if a poor person is living paycheck to paycheck and then they lose 5% of their wealth, maybe they can't afford to pay rent anymore. And similarly, we saw during COVID, the UN increased the number of people projected to be at risk for starvation in the third world by like 130 million. So there are certain things that Western countries can tolerate that poorer countries can't. And that's actually part of why you see it here, right? Because we are so wealthy that we've been able to insulate ourselves from natural consequences for decades. If you had a poorer society, the sexual revolution would have fallen apart almost immediately. Because what happens when a man starts impregnating women and then he doesn't care for those children, right? I mean, it's social and economic pandemonium. And very wealthy nations can insulate themselves from that for a little while.
Leftism only exists in wealthy nations.
That's right. That's exactly it. The woke mind virus, as Elon Musk kind of tagged it, is really only in affluent countries. There's no like big woke mind virus spreading all over Africa. They're not transgender outbreaks all over the global south. It's in affluent countries.
It's I talked about this too a while ago when I said feminism can only exist in an empire's sphere. The United States is so secure that we no longer fear for our women. If you go back to tribal era, medieval, whatever, when you're really worried about wild animals and disease, you stub your toe, you die. The men are very desperately like, if the women die, we are wiped out as a civilization. So the women are protected. Keep them in homes, keep them in the camps, surround them. You get to the point where you have a very strong military, a very expansive country, crime goes way down, and we start exuding military force out of the country, and so we face very little threats from within. Then all of a sudden, there's nothing to worry about with women reaching higher positions in government. I know this one probably triggers the feminists, but this is why you don't see these things, like you mentioned, in other parts of the world where they're less affluent, less safe, less secure.
Very true. If we lived in a violent society where people got attacked and shot at and stabbed and raped outside, just walking down the street, it would be risky to send your wife out to the grocery store. It wouldn't happen as much. The guy would be the one that did that.
It still is. It still is a trope of don't walk down a dark alley. And the feminists have been trying, there's this weird inflection point where crime was down enough to where the left started saying, stop victim blaming. But for the longest time, we would tell people, don't go walk through a dark alley at night. And women should be worried, despite the fact that men are more likely to be victims of violent crime. It's also true that men are more likely to be able to physically defend themselves from another man. But it's not just about men. I'm talking about wild animals and just general danger. If you go way back to humans in a tribal era, if you have 100 men and 100 women, and 99 women die, that tribe ceases to exist. If 99 men die, they'll struggle, but they'll probably be okay.
Well, it's not even just a calculation, right? It's men caring about the women in their lives and recognizing, because they're not insulated from the consequences of their actions by an unfathomable amount of wealth, that men and women do have to be in different roles in order to be maximally safe. And so this is something that you have to be unbelievably wealthy to even start to consider as a society. The idea that you would start to swap roles between men and women. When you're living in a state of nature, right? When you're one bad harvest away from your entire family starving, you're not like preoccupied with whether you were called bossy when a man would have been called assertive. It's not even a question. And it's not to say that a society where people are worried about starving all of the time is better. However, I will say there's no argument to be made that those people aren't stronger and more virtuous than we are today. And I'll also add that we could have the best of both worlds if people were capable of living with wealth while still having a spirit of poverty.
There's no generational memory. That's the problem. We don't know what it's like to be preparing for harvest. Some people do, but in the United States, and to say we've only 3 months of food prepared for the winter.
Yeah.
We're in trouble. We're going to have to eat less and hunt more if we're going to make it through this one.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look on balance, I mean, one of my favorite sites out there is like humanprogress.org. Everyone's like, oh, we got too many people. We're never going to make it. The Malthusians were saying that forever. They were wrong. On balance, human progress is great. The innovation's given us lots of flexibility. But the question is, how do we keep the ties that bind us? I mean, part of our motto is this idea of e pluribus unum. And part of the way that you teach that is values and culture, shared values. And you think about how easy it was. You go back to, what you guys are talking about, the state of nature. If everyone could live by just a basic truth of don't hurt people and don't take their stuff, we would really not even need government, right? Everything would work just fine. And because people can't abide by that simple maxim, well, somebody's got to be the judge of, well, who was wrong to hurt whoever here. And look at how much government we have now versus how little we could have if people could simply not hurt one another or take their stuff. We have a constitution that's supposed to have a limited form of government, but now we have far more government than will fit within our constitution. And I think the challenge today is how do we get a government small enough to fit back in the constitution? Because we can afford a government that small.
I think just conflict will emerge. Conflict will emerge. I think that we look at things that are... We look at hard times as bad things, but I don't think they are. I think there needs to be a balance between the good times and the bad times to create strong, well-balanced individuals who are capable of surviving hard times. And I feel like, there's that saying, good times make weak men, hard times, etc. But I also feel like it's kind of swinging back and forth like a pendulum, increasing the amount of energy each time. You get a good time, then you get weak men, which give you a hard time, and then it keeps swinging back and forth in terms of of how extreme it gets. What I'm trying to say is, right now we are dealing with a very serious crisis in the United States and in other parts of the world with actual war. We have many, many, many weak men. In fact, I think the overwhelming majority of men in this country are weak. For example, in New York, Daniel Penny defends people on a train. Did anybody in New York come out with signs to protest for Daniel Penny? Maybe a couple here and there. But was there like a big march where the police were yelling at them and they're blocking cars saying he's a hero? No, we don't see that. We do, however, see a lot of people putting up a lot of money, which for a lot of people can be even more courageous if you're saying like, I'm going to take a portion of my resources and allocate to defending this man. So my point is not that there are no strong men or strong people, but then in places like New York and these big cities, you are more likely to see people say, I better keep my head down and not engage. And I was saying this to Glenn Beck earlier. I don't think the problem is that evil exists. I think the problem is that good men do nothing.
Yeah, it's a great quote for a reason. And you go back to the Declaration of Independence, they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor because that's what it takes to defend a country. And we're only the land of the free if we are, in fact, the home of the brave. And it does take courage, whether it's to cut a check, to show up to an event, to participate. You got to make the current system work or it is going to fail.
Strength also is kind of like Darwin would say, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, but the most adaptable to change. It's the most adaptable humans that get by, which I think is why people aren't stepping up sometimes, is because they want to just get by. They want to fit in to survive. But, sometimes you need people to break the mold.
I want to jump to this.
I want to piggyback on that because I think that's a very, very good point. Were you finished though?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Okay. So I think that's a very good point. And one thing I would argue is that virtue is what makes you adaptable, right? A person who's living a life of vice is taking the path of least resistance. And what they're doing is engaging in behaviors that feel good for them in the moment rather than behaving rationally, making a long-term plan and behaving based on what's going to be good for them down the line. When you're able to do that, when you're able to use your rational faculties to subordinate your passions to what's going to be good for you in the long run, you can adapt to many different kinds of situations. But if you've made yourself accustomed simply to doing whatever feels good for you, well, once the dynamic changes, you're going to have absolutely no idea how to interact with the world.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.